Zoom over here. Apparently we're live, but I haven't seen anything yet.
It always takes a minute of lag, and then we're
Not
never
a minute.
sure.
Surely not a minute. Oh, there we are.
There's Savannah and Susan and Wendy and Carol.
Oh my goodness gracious me. Well, hey, the gang's all here.
Yes.
So for those of you who don't know, we're up to chapter 18 in this incredible tome, The Sea Priestess.
Hi,
and hello,
Shana.
Shana. Which is actually a right riveting read.
Well, it started out really slow, and we thought, what?
It's getting a bit saucy, isn't it?
But
it's
now,
getting a bit saucy.
Yeah.
So, as chapter 18, oh yes, please do spam those hearts all over the place. Oh, pardon me.
Just to recap,
if you recall, he was having one of them visions where they were scrying, and he went deep, and he found himself as the sacrificial lamb, so to speak, having done the wild thing with the sea priestess, and then, surrendered himself to death. And he finished off at this part, and as the vision darkened into death, I awoke. And as I woke, I knew the asthma had me by the throat. And that was the end of our last session. But it follows on, so I shall begin. I shall never forget that attack so long as I live. I've never had one like it, before or since. Morgan Le Fay, who knew by previous experience what to expect, got straight into her car and went for a doctor. I made her open the windows before she left so that I could get as much air as possible. And as I lay alone, I heard between spasms a curious low moaning note in the sea I had never heard before. I knew that the barometer had been falling rapidly all day, and I wondered whether this sound heralded the storm. A gust of wind bellowed in the chimney, setting the ash dancing in the hearth. And there began a high, shrill whistling overhead, and when the first of the rollers struck the rocks with a boom, I heard the overcarried spray come pattering down in the forecourt. I realised that there was trouble afoot, of a kind we'd never weathered before out at the fort, though we'd already been through some pretty good blows. I wondered whether Morgan would be able to get back to me, and whether the doctor would be able to make it, and got into a sudden panic at the idea of being left there alone and unhelped all night. I lay fighting for breath and listening to the steadily growing thunder on the rocks and the pelt of the spray in the forecourt. Presently, it sounded to me as if something more solid than sprays were coming over. From where I lay, I could just see through one of the big windows, and all of a sudden I saw the gleam of water outside. I don't suppose it was more than ankle deep in the forecourt, but the sight of it threw me into complete panic. I felt it was impossible for Morgan Le Fay to get back, and that I should be alone all night. I got to my feet and struggled across the room to the window and stood leaning against the pillar and looking out into the night. It was pretty dark, but in the light that shone out from the room, I could see the foam going high up in the air as the breakers hit the rocks. It was a terrific night, and every minute it was getting worse.
I made up my mind it was impossible for Morgan Le Fay to get back to me, and that I'd have to stick it out alone. When I saw the beam of light come wheeling into the forecourt, and knew that it was the headlights of her car, the din outside was such that I did not hear her enter the room. And the first thing I heard was her cry as she discovered an empty couch, and made up her mind that I had gone out into the storm. I came out from behind the curtains, looking like my own ghosts, and she called my name and rushed to me and caught hold of me, to my very great surprise, for I had no notion she felt like this about me, and was almost forgetting about my asthma in wondering what it meant, when another paroxysm,
it's like a spasm of
came
asthma
on and reminded me. Okay. Then, over her shoulder, I saw the doctor, who looked as if he too were wondering what it meant, and between them, they got me onto the sofa. I do not think that any of us who went through that night out in the fort will ever forget it. It was, in any case, one of the worst storms that ever swept England, and the wind was just a point or two southwest. If it was just a point or two southwest, it meant that the waves had come onto the fort with the whole force of the Atlantic behind them. It was like a bombardment. Even laying on a bed upstairs, I could feel the jarring thud as the tremendous combers hit the end wall. The storm rose with the tide, and towards midnight it was at its height, and there was no question of the doctor getting back. He was here, and he had to stop here. The forecourt was swamped. But, thank God, it was only the wind blows crests and not the solid body of the waves that was coming over. And the windows held, which was lucky, for the pergola went to glory. I guess that means it got taken down.
Yes.
And I was afraid that chunks of it would get thrown at them by force through the wind. The din was indescribable. I don't know what the din is.
Din, noise, din. It's a din. It's like, a
All right.
cacophonous noise,
Okay.
a din.
The noise.
Gosh.
The noise
English
was
lesson.
indescribable. There was a high, shrill screeching of the gale, every pinnacle of a rock and point of the building whistling its own note, and then there was the general roar of the sea all around us, and the thundering bang, bang, bang as the breakers hit the point broadside on. There was a furious rushing sound as the broken water raced up the rocks, and the smack and spatter of the crests of the waves coming over onto the forecourt. I have never heard anything like it in all of my days.
I guess they were in the throes of an elemental storm. We've been in one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Me?
Yeah.
All right. There was something shattering about the very loud noise anyway, even when there was no actual danger. But we did not know what was going to happen out there on the point, for if the sea had once succeeded in knocking a gap in any of the embrasures, there was a very good chance of our being drowned out, like lost Atlantis. And it came pretty near to doing it, I soon discovered, as I climbed round the footings a week later and found the underpinning pulled out in half a dozen places. Ooh. So there we were, out on the point in the din, noise, and the darkness. And then, to add to the gaiety of nations, my heart began to give out. I had the best of it after that, for I slipped into unconsciousness, leaving the other folk to get on with it. It was then I met the sea gods. It seemed to me that I was out of my body, floating upright and clad in a shroud. I was hung in mid-air over the fort, and though the din and the uproar of the storm were all around me, I did not even feel its force, for I was of another dimension to the warring elements. There was a fitful moonlight coming and going amid the wind-torn clouds. When it shone, I could see rank upon rank of white-crested billows driving in from the Atlantic, rising and falling in long, regular lines like galloping cavalry. Then, off the point, where the currents and tides took charge, everything broke up into a welter of foaming, roaring water, with squirts and boilings where the sunk reefs checked the rush. Then the moon and the thundering then the moon would disappear behind jagged masses of clouds, and in the darkness the roaring and thundering sounded louder than ever. Then out she would come again, as the driving gale swept the sky, and I could see the reef and all the sunken rocks roaring and spouting like fountains. Then I noticed that in all the din there was a rhythm, and my ear began to pick out the tremendous orchestration of the storm. I could hear the deep-toned roar of the surf under the cliffs, and the clangour of the waves on the outlying rocks of the point, and the tenor of the roaring gale, and the high piccolo notes of the wind round the buildings. Through it all came clarion calls and bells, which I suppose, if the truth were known, were the drugs singing in my head, but which I thought were psychic phenomena. In my delirium I rode the gale as a seagull rides, balancing against the pressure of the wind.
And then the faces began to appear in the waves, and out of the wind-whipped foam and the shadow forms built. They built themselves up, and I saw the white horses had riders.
Oh my.
Some had winged Viking helmets and armor, some had wild flying robes and hair, and these last were the choosers of the slain, who caught up to their saddle bows those who the charging white horses rode down and bore them away to Valhalla. My. And behind these flying outriders, as the great surge follows the surf, I saw the sea gods come, moving with an irresistible momentum, not rising into the air like the rider's rose, but deep in their own element, unhashing, unresting, for the power of the sea is in the weight of the waters and not in the wind-blown crests. These great ones rose with the tide, and like the tide, nothing might withstand them. Their faces were vast and calm. They were the rulers of the great waters, and in their realm their word was law. By their grace, and not otherwise, life moved on the surface, or lived at the tide mark, and only those might live who knew this. Everybody at their ease. Oh, I must have skipped a page.
Yes, you did.
Okay. And I saw with clear eyes the folly of men who thought they might master the sea. For only by the grace of the sea gods does man live upon the face of this land. For if they gathered themselves together in wrath, they could drown the earth. And I saw that man's life is spun like a thread between irresistible forces that had a breath, that with a breath could destroy him, but that nevertheless from them he draws his strength. For there is in the earth a reservoir of elemental force, just as there is a fountain of life beyond the far stars, and from the violence of the sea, the violence of man's own nature draws its energy, even as he draws breath from the air, and all things are but one thing, and the last analysis, and there is no part of that is not of the gods. That within me, which answered to the sea, was awakened by the storm, and I knew that there can be in a man a dynamic force that bears down opposition by sheer momentum. But this can only be in a man when he is as cruel as the sea and cares nothing for the destruction or self-destruction, for the twin poles of this force are courage and cruelty. Ooh, there's a Kabbalic reference.
Isn't there just?
And there is a nobility about it that the world has forgotten in the cult of love.
With the turn of the tide, the sea began to go down, and at a peep of day, the dick-mouthed medico went off into his car and got a Bristol consultant on the phone, and likewise Breadmore, and in due course the whole party met at the fort and held what looked like the beginnings of a post-mortem on me. The dick-mouthed man had got all sorts of fancy degrees and went by the book. Old Beermore had got the least that enabled him to sign a death certificate and went by human nature.
Oh my.
And they wrangled over my body like a couple of hyenas. Beardmore was in the habit of shooting me full of morphia and chancing my dying on him, doing as he would be done in like circumstances. The dick-mouthed gent said that this was not according to Hoyle, and they began to reproach each other bitterly, anent the Dangerous Drugs Act. I started to stop breathing. The consultant intervened then and saved my life by agreeing with both parties in partiality and shooting a corkful of his own patent dope into me without telling me what it contained. And I slept till the following afternoon and woke up greatly cheered. I knew what the syringe contained all right, for you can't fool anyone who once has had morphia, but I kept my mouth shut, and I'd been nearer eternity than I quite fancied. As always, I had a quick pick-up when Morgan Le Fay was about, or in the offing, for I do not get the ghastly depression that usually follows an attack, and Morgan was having tea with me, and I was reviving nicely, when suddenly we heard a commotion on the landward side of the fort, and shrieks of fury from Mrs. Teth. Morgan went down to see what the fuss was all about, and returned with Scotty. I could not understand why Scotty had caused so much excitement and demanded further information, for I could see that Morgan was trying hard to stifle her smiles. It transpired, in response to my questioning, that Beardmore had informed the family of my predicament, and my sister, with that martyred air I knew so well, had proposed putting aside her parish work and coming out to the fort to help nurse me.
Oh my.
But Beardmore, whom may God reward, said she ought to not leave my mother, and he would get Scotty to go instead. Now Scotty did not run a car on his own, as I always told him about in mine whenever he wanted to go anywhere, and to hire a car to take him out to the fort would have cost £1, which Scotty grudged greatly. So he hit on the bright idea of asking his father-in-law to run him out. Now Scotty's father-in-law, as I think I've mentioned before, is the local undertaker.
Well, they thought he was dead anyway.
And he does not keep a private car either, but runs a kind of pre-hearse in which he takes round the coffin and the layers out. And it was this thing, with a mute at the wheel, that he and Scotty drove up in, for the old boy elected to come too, though whether for the sake of the drive or with an eye for business,
yeah,
I do not know. So it was no wonder that Mrs. Treth went up in the air when she saw them arrive.
As soon as I heard old Whittles. As soon as I heard old Whittles, and there I made him come up, for I like old Whittles. He came in looking rather embarrassed, for he had never met a client at my stage of development before, and I didn't know quite what line to take with him. Deprived of his tape measure, he was at a loss to put himself at ease. I asked him what he generally did when the corpse sat up and winked at him, and he said depended entirely on who it was. Some folk he screwed down quick. Morgan gave him a cocktail, and he settled down to cheer up with some tales from the tomb. I have never laughed so much in my life. An undertaker off duty and
abreacting his repressions is really awfully good fun.
Words.
Abreacting. There's a word you've not heard.
Abreacting his, well, there's word of the day, right? His repressions was awfully good fun. We could hear roars of laughter from the kitchen, too, where the Treths were entertaining the mute. Then, in the middle of it all, the Bristol consultant turned up again, anxious to see what effects his injection had had on me. And when he saw Whittles' equipage standing at the door, he concluded he had polished me off and got a most fearful wind-up, seeing his reputation going west. However, Morgan let him in and soothed him with a cocktail, and then he too joined the party upstairs, and there were more cocktails all around, and my convalescence progressed by leaps and bounds. It seemed that Whittle's grandfather, who had founded the business, had started life as a body snatcher. You should have seen Scotty's face when this bit of information came out. However, the Bristol specialist put everybody at their ease by volunteering the information that his grandfather had been a butcher, not to be outdone. I told them of my ancestor who had been hanged for housebreaking. Then we had more cocktails all around and discussed the
Mendelian theory of heredity.
Mendelian?
I don't know.
That's one
we'll have to go look that up.
Mendelian
theory of
Finally, when
heredity.
The party broke up, Whittles and the specialist were such pals that Whittles offered to show him a shortcut through the marshes, and they departed with Whittles' pre-hearse in the lead and the specialist's luxurious limousine behind them, which was a reversal of the usual order of things. I think I'll look up Mendelian.
There you go. Chapter 19. The specialist had advised that owing to the state of my heart, I should not be allowed to get up for a week. A piece of advice which I, in view of the state of that organ metaphorically as well as literally, was nothing loath to accept, and a very enjoyable week it was. I won't go as far as to say that I lay flat on my back for 7 days, but anyway I had a very good holiday. For the first couple of days I was naturally pretty glad to be in bed, and I lay and listened to the swell that followed the storm pounding away at the rocks like artillery.
The theory describes how traits are passed from parents to offspring through distinct units called genes. So this was just being discovered in the late 18th century.
Behavioural stuff through genes? Interesting. All right then.
An inheritance of patterns that follows laws of segregation and independent assortment, in which genes inherited from either parent segregates into equal frequency.
Well, how
There's a
fascinating
whole
is
big
that?
to do about
Well, there
that.
you
But
go
I
then.
just had to know what that was.
Well,
Sorry,
there you go.
folks. But now we're all
Yes.
educated.
Edumacated. It's good to be edumacated. So for the first couple of days, I was naturally glad to be in bed and lay and listened to the swell that followed the storm pounding away at the rocks like an artillery. And there came the most marvellous halcyon days, which I've noticed often follow a gale. And I lay out in the forecourt in the sun and listened to the gulls having the time of their lives among the huge piles of wrack washed up by the surf. There was one piece of fucus whose stem was as thick as my arm, that measured 28 feet from root to tip. And there were also tragic relics, bits of blue and white and scarlet board that could only have come from a lifeboat. We had, too, the most marvellous sunsets, as if the fires of Azrael had been lit in the west, and the moonrise over that heaving sea was a thing I shall never forget.
Then, too, Morgan sang to me.
Wow.
I never knew before that she could sing. Her singing voice was like nothing else that I'd ever heard. It was halfway between folk song and jazz, rising and falling by quarter tones, and very rhythmical. And her songs were not like any other songs either, being hymns to the old gods and the chants of priests. Moreover, her pitch was not that modern pitch at all. It was in between, so that at first it sounded curiously flat and out of tune. But as one's ear became accustomed to the strange intervals, one realized that it was true music after its kind, and that it spoke direct to the subconscious. And she sang it, not with the full singing voice of a concert singer, nor yet with the wail of a crooner, but with mantric chanting, not loud, but with pure resonant tone that to me was very beautiful, and the rhythm in it was like the beat of the sea. And there were times when there came into it, her voice, a strange, inhuman timbre, curiously metallic. And when this came, there was a change of consciousness, and she was someone else. Then it was that I learned something of the secret of magical images and their use. For borne away on the wings of her song, she became that which she had imagined herself to be in the making of magical images. Then I saw the sea priestess of Atlantis standing before me. Morgan Le Fay, the foster daughter of Merlin, learned in all his lore. I said to her one evening after she had been singing to me, "Morgan, you have become that which you have imagined." She smiled and said, "That way lies power." Then I told her of my vision of the sea cave and the Bell Knoll, and she said, "Supposing I too play that game, Morgan Le Fay, shall I have power?" And then she smiled again and said, "Why not?" Then I told her that in my vision, she had not been herself, but all women, and that I had not been myself, but all men. I could not put it clearer than that, for I did not know what that meant. And she looked at me strangely and said, "That is the key to the sea cave of Bell Knoll." "Morgan, what do you mean?" I said. "Do you remember," she said, "that in Atlantis the priests and priestesses do not marry for love, but as the rites require?" "You were more than a priestess to me in that cave," I said. "I thought you were Aphrodite herself." "I was more than Aphrodite," she said. "Well, I was the Great Mother." "But the Great Mother is an earth goddess," I said. "How can you be her, and the priestess as well, and the priestess of the sea? Do you not know the mystery, saying that all gods are one, and that all goddesses are one goddess, and that there is one initiator? Do you not know that the dawn of manifestation, the gods wove the webs of creation between the poles and pairs of opposites, active and passive, positive and negative, and that all things are these two things in different ways and upon different levels, even priests and priestesses? Wilfred. Then I said, if you cannot love me as a man, Morgan, will you work with me as a priest? She smiled in her curious smile and said, certainly. That's what I have been aiming at. Good Lord, said I, you've got a nerve. Then Morgan Le Fay began to tell me about herself and how things looked from her point of view. It was a curious experience, for I had never dreamt there would be such a viewpoint from any human being. She told me that those whom the gods chose were dehumanized and
Deified.
Ooh.
Apotheosis, eh?
Yes.
Me? Oh, right. For that remark, I said, you would have to have been burnt in the good old days, and quite right too. What are the gods? Said she. God knows, said I. I think they are natural forces personified, said she. So to be made one with the gods is to become the channel of natural forces, and that is not as rare as you might think. And she told me that devout men of all faiths had held that it was possible to bring the soul to a single pointed focus by adoration and meditation and dedication, and that when this took place the god came down and possessed the worshipper, and the power of the god shone out from him like the light from a lamp. She told me too that the ancients had known things of which we moderns had only touched the fringe. When the priest of the moon came to me in the crystal, she said, he asked me if I would like to learn these things, and I said that I would. And he told me to do this I must give myself up to them, and I said that I would do this also. Then he said he would teach me, and little by little he has taught me. He taught me there is but one priesthood, which is the service of the one, whence all life proceeds, and to which all returns, and it is unmanifest, and no man at any time hath known it, or ever shall know it. Only in its works is it known to us, and from these we deduce its nature, and its nature is nature. Primitive man personified its powers and called them gods. Modern man depersonifies them, and calls them forces and factors. Both are true, said she, but neither is the whole truth, for the gods are forces, and the forces are intelligent and purposive, being expressions of the nature of the one. And as it is, so is creation, for creation is the expression of its nature. For as the Chaldean oracles say, the wise man looketh upon the face of nature, and beholdeth therein the luminous countenance of the eternal. And human nature, said she, is part of nature, and you learn a lot about both nature and the gods if you study it. Then she told me the idea of the ancients had of priesthood, that it was mediumship, but it was not the personified god that spoke through the possessed and inspired priest or pythoness. For the personified god is the form under which man represents these potencies to himself. And the real God is so far otherwise, but that the priest, overshadowed by the God, put forth his powers. That which was latent in him was released, and he became for a time what all men would be when perfected.
Then, that being so, I said, what are the gods? God knows, she said. But we know that by doing certain things, we get certain results. And what do you propose to do? I said. I will tell you, she said. And she told me that each man had in him, by virtue of his manhood, to be a priest, and that each woman, by virtue of her womanhood, had it in her to be a priestess, for the source of all life created the worlds by dividing its unmanifest unity into manifesting duality, and that we are created show forth in our being to uncreate reality. Each living soul has its roots in the unmanifest and draws thence its life. And by going back to the unmanifest, we find fulfillment of life.
Interesting.
But because we are limited and imperfect beings, we cannot show forth the infinite in its totality. And because we are imprisoned upon this place, damn karmic planet, of form, we can only conceive the formless as far as minds habituated to form can imagine it. And that, said Morgan Le Fay, is not very far, and the mathematicians go furthest. But we who are men and women, Wilfred, and who want to know the God as he manifests in natures, we see luminous countenance of the eternal in beautiful forms of the gods. And in that way, she said, we learn more and can do more, and if we strive after abstract essence that elude us. She told me how the priest of the moon who instructed her had bid her to go back to the great unmanifest and dedicate herself to the one, leaving aside all the lesser manifestations, and having made that dedication and won that realization and found the roots of her being, he bid her to see the one life manifesting itself in all things and into herself too. And he taught her that manifesting life had two modes or aspects: the active, dynamic, stimulating, and the latent, passive, which receives the stimulus and reacts to it. He showed her how they changed places with one another in an endless dance, giving and receiving, accumulating force and discharging it, never still, never established, ever in a state of flux and reflux, as shown by the moon and the sea and the tides of life, ebbing and flowing, waxing and waning, building and breaking down in the dance of life, of the music of the spheres. Ooh. And he showed her how the passing of the sun through the starry belt of the zodiac makes the greatest of all tides.
And these zodiacal tides, said he, are the illuminations of faith. And today the sun is passing over into Aquarius, the sign of the man, and the old gods are coming back, and man is finding Aphrodite and Ares and great Zeus in his own heart, for that is the revelation of the Aeon.
I am the
child of the Aeon. Morgan Le Fay told me that she had chosen for her part the cult of the great goddess, the primordial mother. And this goddess was symbolized by space and the sea and the innermost earth. She was Rhea and Ge and Persephone, but above all she was Our Lady Isis, in whom all these are summed up. For Isis is both corn goddess and queen of the dead, who are also the unborn, and the lunar crescent upon her brow. Another aspect she is the sea, for life first formed in the sea, and her dynamic aspect she rose from the waves as Aphrodite. And Morgan Le Fay, pursuing these things, had studied the symbols of cult after cult, for all had worshipped the same thing by different names and under different aspects, till at last she found to which her own nature was attuned. And it was not the austere Egyptian faith, nor the radiant gods of Greece, but their primordial Brythonic cult that had its roots in Atlantis, and which the dark Ionian Celt shares with Breton and Basque. For this, she said, is older than the gods of the north, and there is more of wisdom in it, for the gods of the north are mindless, being the formulations of fighting men. But the great goddess is older even than the gods that made the gods, for men knew the function of the mother long before they understood the part played by the father. And they adored the bird of space that laid the primordial egg long before they worshipped the sun as the fecundator.
That's a word.
That's where you get fecundity from.
They conceived all beings as coming forth from the sea, and they were right. For there was a time when the waters covered the earth, as both Scripture and the rocks bear witness. Then came the time when they learned the part of the Father, and they looked in nature for the fecundating. How do you say that?
Fecundating, father of all.
Fecundating. Oh, come on, father of all. And perceived it to be the sun. So they adored the sun as well as the sea. But the cult of the sea is older, and she is the great mother. But in my dedication to the moon and the sea, Morgan Le Fay, I have chosen that part which was passive, and I have had to await the coming of the fecundator, and I still await. Might it be, said I, that I should play that part for you, Morgan Le Fay, for I love you? It might be, she said, but we can but try, and it does not matter whether you love me or not if you can bring forth that power. It matters very much to me, I said. It doesn't matter to me, she said, for I am a dedicated priestess, and if it matters to you, you will not be able to bring it through. I didn't understand what she meant then, but I knew later. How many men have you tried this with, Morgan Le Fay, said I. A very great many, Wilfred Maxwell, she said, and from all I have got something, but from none have I got everything, and I was beginning to think that it is not to be had when I met you. But surely, I said, I, with my bad health, have less to give you than most. On the contrary, she said, there are possibilities in you that I had not realized before. And she told me that in every being there are two aspects, the positive and the negative, the dynamic and the receptive, the male and the female. And this is shown forth in rudimentary form, even in the physical body. In normal folk, one of these is dominant, and one is recessive, and these determine the sex. But through the recessive one, and though the recessive one is latent, it nevertheless is there, as is well known to those who study anomalies of development and dis-ease, and are still better known to those who study the anomalies Jesus, of the soul. But the ancients did not concern themselves with anomalies, but said that the soul was bisexual, and that as one or the other aspect manifested in the world of form, the alternative aspects was latent in the world of spirit. And if we look into our own hearts, we shall see how true this is, for each of us has two sides of their nature, the side that is forthcoming by its own dynamism, and the side that lies latent, awaiting inspiration, and that comes not forth unless it is evoked. And this, she said, is the greater side of each one of us. And in a man, it is his spiritual nature. And in a woman, it is her dynamic will.
Well, you go. There you go. Then she told how in some of the two sides of their nature came near to equilibrium, not in any physical or instinctual anomaly, but in temperament. For anomaly is due to the repression of the dominant factor, whereas in that of which she spoke, it was the two-sided soul that was finding expression through the higher self. And this was due to the work of initiation in past lives. I learnt these things in Atlantis, when I was one of the sacred clan, said she, and the memory was reborn with me, and I have always known it. But you, I do not think, were ever of the initiated priesthood, but by the trick you played upon the high priest of Belnol, you got something, though how much I do not know, and it remains to be seen. At least I forged a personal bond with you, said I, 128. Priestesses have no personal bonds, said she. Anyway, it served to bring us together, said I, but she did not answer, and that angered me. There is another way of looking at it all, said I. It may have been that my dreams and my visions all sprang from the same thing, sex, repression and wish fulfillment. For God knows if any ever man had subconscious full of frustrations, I have. That, of course, is an alternative theory, replied Morgan, quite unmoved. And it may be, Miss Le Fay Morgan, for that both your priesthood and your inheritance under our client's will are magical images. What is truth? Asked jesting Pilate. and I suggest that you stop playing the fool with me, lest my partner and I inquire into your antecedents in good earnest. Morgan laughed. Whether my priesthood is a magical image or not, it has been effectual to wake the manhood in you, Wilfred Maxwell. That was an unanswerable argument, and I succumbed to it. And then she said a thing for which, in the mood I was in, I could cheerfully have hit her. Do you realise, Wilfred, how much of the woman there is in you? 50%, said I, same as other folk. My mother was a woman. I don't mean that. I mean your temperament. Yes, I said, I suppose I am being carty. But it's no use arguing with me after I've just had a go of asthma, for there is no sense to be got out of me. I don't mean that either. I mean that your nature is predominantly negative. Not as negative as you think, Morgan Le Fay. Having lived all my life with women, I have learnt to assume protective colouring. I may pursue circuitous routes to save trouble, but I generally arrive where I want to get in the end. Moreover, I live and carry on my business in a very conventional town, and if I were suspected of being unconventional, I should lose business. So when I want to kick over the traces, as at the present moment, I come outside the 3-mile limit, my dear.
I don't mean that either. You are a beast, Wilfred. I know you are nothing like as mild as you look, and your slyness is the thing I like the least about you. I mean that you are not positive and dynamic as most men are. Well, my dear girl, I haven't got the physique for that job either. You can't be a husky he-man under 8 stone and only get yourself thrashed. And what you are pleased to call my slyness is really tact and diplomacy. Why, go out of your way to stir up avoidable trouble when there is so much unavoidable trouble. Then if those are your principles, why not live up to them? Why go out of your way to pick a quarrel with me? Why go out of your way to pick a quarrel with me, Morgan? Do you expect any man to like being told he is half woman, and that the truer it is, the less he likes it? If any man ever asks you if you had played this game before, you swear you haven't. See? I thought you would be a little more understanding than this. Then you thought wrong. I know the good old days, the priestess of the Great Mother, the priests, of the Great Mother castrated themselves in her honor. But I'm not doing that. To hell with you, Morgan Le Fay. There is a commonplace relationship which you can have with any female of the species, and there is a subtle magical relationship that is very rare. Which do you prefer? Have I any choice? Shan't I have to be content with what I'm given? Yes, she said. I'm afraid you will, but I am sorry you take it like that, for I could give you so much. Why are you taking all this trouble over me, Morgan Le Fay? I am certain this is not for my own sweet sake. Quite apart from your repeated assurance that priestesses have no preference in these matters. Because, Wilfred, if you and I can do this thing, we can break trail for those who come after us, and we shall bring back to modern life something that has been lost and forgotten that is badly needed.
That something being the knowledge of the subtle magnetic relationship between a man and a woman, and the fact that it is part of a larger whole. Do you remember how you felt in the cave? That I was all women and you were all men? Do you remember how our personalities stood aside and we were just channels of the... Excuse me!
Oh dear.
I am so sorry.
Bless you.
We were just channels of force, the positive and negative forces out of which creation is built. And how, when this happened, primordial powers rushed through us straight from the unmanifest, and it was a tremendous thing. This was what was aimed at by the temple-trained priestesses and the heterae, if that's how you pronounce it. And it is what is lacking in our modern understanding of these things. You can see dozens of marriages where there is an annual baby and occasional twins, and yet something is lacking. And you can see curious companionships where they can't marry, yet fulfill a great need, and they don't necessarily go weekending either, Wilfred. People think that sex is physical and that love is emotional, and they don't realise that there is something else between a man and a woman which is magnetic in just the same way as the compass turns to the pole. And it isn't in them any more than it is in the compass, but it is something that passes through them and uses them, and it belongs to nature. And it is the thing that has kept me young, Wilfred, when I ought to be an old, old woman. And it is the thing that is making you, who used to be a mother's boy, as quarrelsome as a cock on a midden.
Then in that case it's surely a thing that I am better without, for I was a good young man until I met you. You will be a better young man before I have done with you, said Morgan Le Fay. But you do understand, don't you, Wilfred, why I won't marry you? Physically, I may be a comparatively young woman, for they say a man is as young as his arteries, so I suppose a woman is as young as her endocrines. But mentally I am an old, old woman. The sort of thing you need has no meaning for me. I don't want to tie myself up in a marriage, and if I did, I believe I should suddenly become the old hag that I really am. It is not in me to love you, Wilfred, but I am exceedingly fond of you, and with that you will learn from me. I believe you will be able to love some girl, very much indeed. Morgan Le Fay, having known you, do you suppose that I will ever love anyone else? Yes, I hope so, Wilfred. If I do my work rightly, you certainly will. For what I want to study with you is a way in which these magnetic channels can be opened and powerful, powerful energy brought through. It is a cold-blooded proposition, said I, but I suppose I must be thankful for small mercies. In fact, I ought to be used to them, for they're all I've ever had. I knew now the kind of golden knife that Morgan Le Fay had been getting ready for me, and that history was repeating itself to perfection, and like the Aztec slave, I would have my year, during which I was royally treated, and then it would come to an end, and that would be slow and painful. Next day I got to work on a panel of the stormy sea, and I worked up.
Keep going.
And I worked up from the foam of the white-capped waves, the battle of madness, and the galloping seahorses and their riders, and the indigo hollows behind were bleak, calm, and ruthless faces of the greater gods.
Something just happened. We threw ourselves out. Hopefully we're still going and it didn't just...
Why does it do that?
I don't know. Mercury retrograde can't stand us.
If
it
you
appears
can still
we're going.
see us, can you tell us?
Can you just say hello and we'll keep going? Because for whatever reason, YouTube Studio just said we were signed out and we might have been whittering to ourselves. Oh, well, that looks like it's come alive again. So I don't know. Just if you're there and you're watching, say a quick hello, and hopefully we didn't just all grind to a halt. If we did, we'll go back and read the bit again.
If you tell us where you got to.
I think we got Morgan Le Fay, having known you, do you suppose that I will love anyone else? I think that's where we got to. And then for whatever reason, I think something went horribly wrong. If you're watching, can you just say a quick hello? Yes, you're visible. Thanks, Shana. And
okay.
did we go off air? Or are we just working as we're supposed to work? Because when we edit all this together, I'm going to have to cut this piece out. As you do. Do we need to repeat anything, or did you get it all? I know there's such a terrible delay. We have to wait like 10 seconds before somebody gets back to us. Was there a sickening pause? Did we lose? Because I don't know what's going on. It's 10:02. I don't know if we've time to do another chapter. Let's have a look. Chapter 20.
You are visible, not here.
Not here? I don't understand what not here is. Oh, it's only a short chapter.
We can do this the last
We can do this.
It's only 3 pages. All right.
We're just going to assume that for whatever reason we lost it. So why don't we take it from Morgan Le Fay, having known you, do you suppose I will love anyone else? Oh, it says you were there all the time.
Okay, great.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Then we'll go.
All right, chapter 20.
Chapter 20 we'll jump on to.
That was weird. It just went black and it said that we were off air.
Yes, to use YouTube Studio, sign in. Well,
So
I was
bizarre.
signed in. What are you doing, you stupid people?
Oh, sorry, folks. We can only go by what we see on our end.
It's Mercury retrograde, eh? Yeah. So, chapter 20. The following Monday I was still far from well and thoroughly edgy and nervy, so Morgan drove me down in her little coupe to Starber, and I phoned Scotty and arranged to stop at the fort for another week. He said he could carry on all right and would fix things up with my family. I didn't think they would take much fixing, as my sister certainly wouldn't spend a quid on a car for the pleasure of my company, and Whittle swore he wouldn't take her anywhere, except in his official capacity.
Shouldn't be dead.
It was exceedingly decent of old Morgan to keep me on, and I don't know why she did it, for I was as fractious as a spoilt child. When we got back from the Starboard trip, after fixing everything up, my mood changed again, and I said I was going to pack up and return to Dickford forthwith. It was in my mind that I had enough of all of these upheavals and I would break with Morgan Le Fay. She said I must do as I liked, which made me wild. She suggested, however, that I should have a meal before I left, as I would land in too late for lunch, and she had brought something special back from Starber for me. Being a male, I fell for this. Then I knew that nothing would induce me to chuck Morgan till she finally chucked me. The last of the swell that followed the storm had died away, though the halcyon days went on and the hunter's moon sailed in a cloudless sky over the sea by night.
Well, then we know what that is.
One calm and perfect evening we strolled up to the crest of the down, passing between the fallen cairns of the ancient worship till we came to the place where the overthrown pylon lay on the grass. We sat down on the fallen lintel and watched the moon rise behind Balnol. She came up a queer, dull orange, for there was a mist over the marshes, and presently she cleared it and rode the cloudless sky like a ship in full sail. Little light wisps of cloud going the other way, lending her the appearance of speed. It was a strange thing to watch that great silver moon that looked so near and went at such a pace. First branch. If anything could, it gave one the realization there was more in the universe than our Earth. Everyone knows nowadays the effect the sunlight has on health and vegetation, but Morgan told me that there was an ancient lost knowledge of the power of the light of the moon and how it affects vegetation in a way we do not realize with our uncertain island climate. But in places where the sunlight is constant, they know the effect of the moon and are careful to sow seed and cut timber according to her phases. She told me too that the moon had a profound effect on mental states and moods, as is well known to any who have to work with the mentally sick. And even we who consider ourselves nominally normal are more affected than we choose to believe.
Perhaps that is what is making me so cantankerous, said I, glad of the chance to find something to blame it on. Yes, said Morgan, quite seriously. It probably is. The moon intensifies everything and brings it to its crisis. Have you never noticed how many crises take place around a full moon? What crisis are you expecting now? I said. The crisis of you and me, she said, and took my arm and walked with me to the end of the down that looked toward the land. I said nothing, for I had nothing to say. The mist that rose from the marshes gave the illusion of water where the moonlight fell upon it, and Bell Knoll rose like an island out of the misty sea. The land is drowning, I said. as it was when they sent for you, Morgan Le Fay." She smiled. "It is not strange," she said, "that men think they can keep back the sea by anything save observing her ways." "I suppose it is the same with all natural forces," I said. "We try it on with what we are pleased to call our morals, and then we get drowned out." We strolled back over the dew-soaked grass with thousands of rabbits feeding all around us.
Bunnies!
The dew was the only water supply they had, but they didn't seem to mind. We came down to the fort and then strolled out over the rocks to the point. The tide was very low tonight, for the moon and the sun were making common cause for once. "Wilfred," said Morgan Le Fay, "shall we light a sea fire out on the point?" I looked where she pointed and saw a large, flat, table-like surface of rock, obviously artificial, and was slowly coming up through the ripples. It was the uttermost end of the ebb, and in another half hour the tide would be turning, so there was no time to be lost. Morgan and I worked hard. Despite her lovely gown of sea-green silk, we raised a pile of juniper boughs with cedar and sandalwood mingled among them. We made it pyramidal.
Is it a pyramid?
Pyramid, yeah. For it was the ancient custom. And then, as with the hair-like weed on the edge of the rocks slowly turned round and began to scream the other way, we put the match to the pile. It took the fire well, as juniper does, the flames leaping from twig to twig and throwing off the showers of spark that characterized burning juniper. In the heart of the flame, the cedar and sandal glowed with fiercer heat, and the scented smoke went rolling over the sea. Presently, a shallow silver ripple came washing over the level surface of the rock, and it met the burning base. A furious hiss replied to it in a line of the gibbous moon. The sea thought better of it and kept quiet for a bit after that. Then, with the rising tide behind it, the ground swell sent another ripple across the rock. Furious hisses and clouds of steam rose from the angry fire. And then we saw a curious sight. The crest of the pyramidal pyre went burning on, crowned with flame and plumed with the scent of rolling smoke. By it was all round the water.
Slowly, the tide rose higher, but the crest burned as fiercely as ever. Not easily could the sea accept the sacrifice and devour its prey. Then finally, its base undermined by the working of the tide, the whole fiery pyramid collapsed into the dark creeping water in a shower of sparks and flying burning brands that sank hissing through the softly waving weed. And I smelt again, as I had smelt in my dream, the acrid odour of burning wood extinguished by salt water. And there came to me a vision of the sea as the source of all things. I saw her lay down the sedimentary rocks and withdraw and leave them land. I saw the slow process of the lichens and the weather that broke down the rocks into soil. I saw the sea rise, then take them again as the primordial slime, and in that slime arose the first life. And when I saw life come ashore from the slime and grow feet and wings, and then I knew why Morgan worshipped the sea, for it was the first of created things and nearer to the primordial than anything else. That night I could not sleep, and I sat up in my bed and smoked cigarette after cigarette.
Great for an asthma patient.
I was just going to say that, and watched the moon set. She went down a dull copper as she had risen, for a haze had gathered over the waters, and I thought the weather was in for a change. It may be that watching that shining disk had hypnotized me, for I began to see back into the beginning of things with a great clarity. I remembered the Greek tag, Panterei, and that the mother of gods was Rhea. I looked out into the measureless depths of interstellar space and saw arise a fountain out of which water, like liquid moonlight, poured in boundless abundance. This, I thought, is the first begetting. I watched the liquid light gather into a great pool in the depths of space. I saw currents arise in the pool, and presently it began to swirl, and out of its swirling motion arose the suns. And I knew that water had two moods, the flowing and the still, and not until is it still can life arise in it. And learning as I had learned that the beginning of things is reflected through all of their nature, I reckoned that there must be in us this flowing of our energies and their gathering into a deep pool, and that these things might be under the moon rhythms. And I recognized that it was a man's nature to be predominantly dynamic, like the first outpouring, and that it was predominantly a woman's nature to gather into a deep pool wherein life can form. But I knew also that there must be an alternating rhythm in these things, and that maybe it is this rhythm we have forgotten.
Then I began to see where I stood with Morgan Le Fay, and why she had seen in me possibilities that she had not found before in other men with whom she had been friends. It may have been my upbringing by women, or it may have been my bad health, or it may have been that I was a child of my parents' old age. But in me, the physical dynamism is low. I am never really virile, unless I'm in a tantrum. Morgan, on the other hand, was extraordinarily vital. Then I saw why there must be priestess as well as priest, for there is a dynamism in a woman that fecundates the emotional nature of a man as surely as he fecundates her physical body. This was the thing forgotten by modern civilization, which stereotypes conventionalities.
And conventionalizes all things and forgets the moon. Yeah, we spell I's with S's.
Yeah, I see that. All things and forgets the moon, Our Lady of Flux and Reflux. Then I saw what Morgan was playing at with me, that she was trying to discover the manner in which this lost force worked. Most men wouldn't let her do it, for it is a male convention to keep the initiative at all costs. But behind our convention there is a primordial nature, and I saw why vamps have such a success in this kind of unselfish women gets left on the shelf. For men do not love the women who give and give, but the ones who make demands on them shall call out their strength. It is women like Morgan Le Fay, who will not give themselves to any man completely, who are best loved, not the woman who will give their all. Love is one of those things in which to travel hopefully is better than to arrive.
I wondered what the hell Morgan thought she was driving at with me, and where she expected me to land. As far as my experience of life went, we could only land in a mess, but she seemed to have other ideas. And as the And as the only alternative open to me was to go back to Dickford and be a decent citizen, and I could not see myself doing that, I decided to give Morgan her head and let her get on with it. That is, so far as the option was mine. I had a shrewd suspicion that we had reached a point by now where it might have been, or it mightn't be, his option. Yeah.
It's written really weirdly.
Having arrived at this decision, I was considerably more amiable next morning than I had been for the last 10 days, and I settled down to watch Morgan and see what she would do. I was also able to settle down and paint the last of the panels, the still and moonlit sea, and in the lights and shadows of water, and the cloud of the face of Morgan Le Fay appeared from every conceivable angle.
All right.
Dun, dun, dun.
Chapter 21 up next.
Oh my goodness gracious me, and there's chanting in chapter 21.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Wouldn't it?
I like to chant.
Oh, well, you can have at it. You should start the next chapter. Thank you so much, everybody, for staying with us during our crazy whatever, even though we didn't pause, we thought we did, because the whole thing went blank, our end.
This is some sort of weird Hebrew.
Careful what you're invoking. Stopping now. Stop now.
Dinner. Oh my.
Oh my. You said there was Kabbalistic stuff in it.
Yeah.
There absolutely is. So thank you. There
All
you
right.
go. We have arrived at the beginning of chapter 21, whereupon our next thrilling instalment, which will be instalment number 9. We'll do that then. But now,
I think I'm very tired.
me too. I think I want to stretch my legs out and just chill for a moment.
All right.
With my lovely peach and orange juice. It's quite nice,
He has a
freshly
juicer.
squeezed. She got the juicer.
He's got a juicer. He's dangerous now.
I'm-
All right,
I'm-
folks.
I'm eating healthy stuff. It's really good. So
All right.
strongly
We'll
recommend
see you
it.
again soon.
We will.
Be well. Peace.
And blessed be.